In the records of ancient literature, there exists a collection of texts that transcends time, carrying with them the weight of millennia-old wisdom and interest. Among these respected works is the Book of Daniel. But within the pages of this book lies a lesser-known section known as the Additions to Daniel. What secrets lie buried within the ancient text, and what exactly is the mystery of Bel and the dragon? Join us as we unravel the additions of the Book of Daniel. In the 3rd year of Joachim's rule as king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, marched to Jerusalem and surrounded it, taking control. It's said that God allowed Nebuchadnezzar to capture Joachim and seize some sacred items from the temple, which he then took back to Babylon as spoils of war. Nebuchadnezzar then ordered his top official, a eunuch named Ashpenaz, to select some of the brightest and most promising young men from among the captives in Jerusalem. These youths were to be groomed for service in the Babylonian court. Nebuchadnezzar specifically wanted those who were not only physically flawless, but also intelligent, wise, and discerning, capable of serving in his royal court. These chosen ones, among them Daniel, Ananias, Azariah, and Mishael, were given new Babylonian names by Ashpenaz. Daniel became known as Bullchaser, Ananias as Cedric, Mishael as Mishak, and Azariah as Abednego. Additionally, Nebuchadnezzar ordered that these youths receive 3 years of intensive education and training in the Babylonian language, customs, and knowledge. During this time, they were to be provided with the choicest food and wine from the king's table to ensure they were well-nourished and fit to serve in his court. After this period of preparation, they would be presented before the king for his service. Daniel made a firm decision in his heart that he would not eat the rich food and wine provided by the king, as he believed it would go against his principles. He spoke to the chief of the palace attendants, asking for permission to stick to a simpler diet. Interestingly, Daniel had already gained favor and kindness from the chief of the attendants, likely due to his character and conduct. The chief of the attendants expressed concern for Daniel, fearing the king's displeasure if Daniel and his companions appeared less healthy or vibrant than the other young men who were partaking of the king's food. Daniel, however, proposed a solution, a test period of 10 days during which he and his friends would eat only vegetables and drink water. After this time, their appearance would be compared to that of the other young men who had been dining on the king's fare. The chief of the attendants agreed to this arrangement, and they carried out the plan. During the 10 days, Daniel and his friends stuck to their simple diet, while others continued to enjoy the king's lavish provisions. At the end of the trial period, the chief of the attendants observed the results and found that Daniel and his companions appeared just as healthy and vigorous, if not more so, than those who had been indulging in the king's food. So, the chief continued to allow them to eat according to their chosen diet. After 10 days had passed, the faces of the 4 children looked healthier and livelier than even the king's table-fed youngsters. They didn't eat fancy supper or drink fine wine anymore. Instead, they had simple food like pulse and water. But surprisingly, these children, with their humble diet, were gifted by God with exceptional understanding and wisdom. They became experts in all sorts of learning and knowledge. One of them, Daniel, even could interpret dreams and visions. When the appointed time arrived and the king summoned them, they were brought before Nebuchadnezzar by the chief eunuch. The king conversed with them, and it became evident that none could match Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah in intelligence and insight. They stood out among the crowd, their eyes shining with wisdom. In every test of intellect and knowledge that the king presented, these 4 youths surpassed even the most learned enchanters and sorcerers in the entire kingdom. Daniel's brilliance continued to shine until the reign of King Cyrus began. In the 2nd year of Nebuchadnezzar's rule, he had a very strange dream that left him feeling quite bewildered. It was so puzzling that he couldn't even sleep properly afterward. So, he decided to summon all sorts of mystical experts, enchanters, magicians, sorcerers, and Chaldeans, to help him understand what the dream meant. When they arrived, Nebuchadnezzar told them about his troubling dream, expecting them to interpret it for him. He demanded that they not only interpret the dream, but also tell him what he dreamt. This request threw them into a panic because they knew it was nearly impossible. Nebuchadnezzar warned them that if they couldn't tell him both the dream and its interpretation, he would have them punished severely. However, if they succeeded, he promised those great rewards and honor. The Chaldeans, feeling the pressure, pleaded with the king to just tell them the dream, and they would figure out the interpretation. But Nebuchadnezzar wasn't buying it. He saw through their delay tactics and suspected they were stalling for time. He believed they were just trying to come up with some made-up story. In a fit of rage, Nebuchadnezzar threatened to destroy all the wise men of Babylon if they couldn't fulfill his demand. The Chaldeans, feeling helpless, admitted that what the king asked for was beyond their abilities. They explained that no one on earth, not even the most powerful king, had ever made such an impossible request of them. They insisted that only the gods themselves could reveal such a thing. This enraged Nebuchadnezzar even more, and he ordered the execution of all the wise men in Babylon. The king's decree was issued, commanding the execution of the wise men. They began to carry out the orders, seeking out Daniel and his companions to put them to death. However, Daniel, wise and clever, spoke up with prudence. He advised the captain of the royal guard, questioning the sudden and forceful command from the king. Eric, the captain, conveyed Daniel's concerns to the king. Daniel then pleaded for time to interpret the decree. Returning home, he gathered his friends, Anemias, Misal, and Azura, to seek mercy from the Almighty, praying for guidance in unraveling the mystery. In a divine revelation during the night, the mystery was unveiled to Daniel. Overflowing with gratitude, he blessed the God of heaven for his infinite wisdom and understanding, acknowledging the divine power over all earthly matters. With newfound clarity, Daniel approached the king's appointed executor, Arya, affirming his readiness to interpret the decree before the king. Arya, recognizing Daniel's exceptional insight, presented him to the king as the one capable of revealing the interpretation. The king spoke to Daniel, whose other name was Belteshazzar, asking if he could tell him about a dream he had and explain its meaning. Daniel replied, saying that the wise men, magicians, enchanters, and sooth Susanna, who was not only beautiful but also deeply devout, was raised by righteous parents who instilled in her the teachings of the law of Moses. In that same year, 2 elders were appointed as judges, as prophesied, to oversee matters in Babylon. However, these elders did not uphold justice, but rather indulged in wickedness, abusing their power. They frequently visited Joachim's house, where people came seeking legal advice. Susanna, unaware of their sinister intentions, would often take walks in her husband's garden during the noon hours. The elders, seeing her beauty, were consumed by lust for her. They deliberately turned away from righteousness, ignoring divine judgment, and allowed their desires to cloud their minds. Despite their mutual infatuation with Susanna, the elders kept their desires hidden, ashamed to confess their sinful thoughts to one another. Instead, they secretly watched her day after day, waiting for an opportunity to act on their wicked impulses. Finally, one day, as Susanna left the garden to return home for lunch, one elder suggested to the other that they should leave as well. However, their intentions were far from innocent. So, after they left each other, they both turned back and returned to the same place. Then they discussed why they felt so strongly attracted to her. Eventually, they agreed on a time to meet her alone. And it just so happened that while they were keeping watch, she went into the garden with only 2 maids. She wanted to freshen up in the garden because it was hot, and no one else was there except for the 2 elders, who were hiding and observing her. She asked her maids to bring her oil and washing balls and to close the garden doors for privacy. The maids followed her instructions and left through private doors to fetch the items she requested. Unbeknownst to them, the elders were hiding and watching the whole time. When the maids were out of sight, the 2 elders approached her and said, "Look, the garden doors are closed, and no one can see us. We love you and want to be with you. If you don't agree, we'll accuse you of being with a young man and sending your maids away." Susanna let out a heavy sigh, feeling trapped from all sides. "I feel cornered," she admitted. "If I obey your demand, it means death for me. But if I refuse, I can't escape your power over me." I'd rather face whatever consequences you have in store for me than sin in the eyes of the Lord." Her words echoed with desperation, her voice breaking as she cried out. The two elders, unmoved by her plea, persisted in their accusation against her. One of the elders swiftly opened the garden door, setting off a commotion among the household servants who heard Susanna's distress. They hurriedly entered through a hidden entrance to witness the unfolding events. As the elders presented their case, the servants were taken aback, feeling a deep sense of shame. Susanna, whose reputation had always been untarnished, now found herself at the mercy of baseless accusations. The following day, as the community gathered, Joachim, Susanna's husband, stood among them, unaware of the sinister intentions harbored by the two elders. These men, driven by malicious intent, persisted in their quest to condemn Susanna to death. In front of the assembled crowd, they demanded the presence of Susanna, the wife of Joachim, along with her entire family. And so, Susanna appeared, accompanied by her father, mother, children, and relatives, unaware of the perilous trial awaiting her. Susanna, a woman of exceptional delicacy and breathtaking beauty, found herself in a harrowing situation. Wicked men, consumed by envy of her loveliness, demanded that her face be uncovered, despite her modesty. As her friends and onlookers gazed upon her, tears welled in their eyes. Amidst the crowd, the two elders stepped forward, placing their hands upon her head. Despite her distress, Susanna, with tears streaming down her cheeks, lifted her eyes towards the heavens, placing her trust in the Lord. With solemn voices, the elders recounted a tale of deceit and betrayal. They claimed that while strolling alone in the garden, Susanna had been accosted by a young man who had hidden himself away. They alleged that he had taken advantage of her, despite her resistance. Although witnesses had tried to intervene, the man's strength proved too great, and he fled, leaving Susanna at their mercy. Yet, when pressed to reveal the identity of her assailant, Susanna remained steadfast in her silence. This defiance only served to convince the assembly of the elders' version of events. Without further ado, they condemned Susanna to death. Thus, in a cruel twist of fate, the very beauty that had captivated onlookers now became the cause of Susanna's unjust condemnation. Susanna cried out loudly, addressing the eternal God who knows all secrets and sees all things before they happen. She pleaded, saying, "You know they have lied about me, plotting false accusations. I face death for crimes I never committed, concocted by these men's malice." The Lord heard her cries. As she was about to be executed, a young man named Daniel, filled with the Holy Spirit, spoke out boldly, proclaiming his innocence in her bloodshed. The crowd turned to him in confusion, asking for clarification. Daniel stood firm amidst them, rebuking their rash judgment. He questioned their wisdom, asking if they were so foolish as to condemn an innocent woman without proper examination or knowledge of the truth. He urged them to return to the place of judgment, pointing out the falsehood in the accusations against Susanna. The people hurried back, heeding his words. The elders, recognizing the honor bestowed upon Daniel by God, invited him to sit among them and explain. Daniel suggested separating the accusers, promising to conduct a thorough examination. And so, they were divided, awaiting Daniel's scrutiny. He beckoned one of them over and spoke to him, saying, "Oh, you who have grown old in wickedness, now your sins from the past have been exposed. You have pronounced false judgments, condemning the innocent and letting the guilty go free. Yet, the Lord declares that you shall not slay the innocent and righteous." If he truly witnessed what he claimed, he should tell him, by asking under which tree he saw them together. The man replied, "Under the mastic tree." Daniel responded, "You have lied, and your lie will be your undoing. For even now, the angel of God has received the decree to divide you in two." So, he set him aside and ordered the other to be brought forward. Addressing him, Daniel said, "You descendant of Canaan, not of Judah, beauty has misled you, and lust has corrupted your heart. This is how you have treated the daughters of Israel, and they, out of fear, have associated with you. But the daughter of Judah would not tolerate your wickedness. So, tell me, where were they when you saw them together? Daniel inquired. The man hesitated before answering. They were under a big whole tree. Daniel's eyes narrowed as he warned, "You've spun a dangerous tale, my friend. The angel of God stands armed with